I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Yedam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niradayami.
Sanji
Yi Janam La Yanju Madu Dani Yazuji Nagi Chinye Jibezo Nam Ji Rola Benji Zanye Rubaryo Jadan Yi Janam La Yanju Madu Dani Yazuji Nagi Chinye Jibezo Nam Ji Rola Benji Zanye Rubaryo Jadan Ji Janam La Yanju Madu Dani Yazuji Nagi Chinye Jibezo Nam Ji Rola Benji Zanye Rubaryo.
What LamRim Chenmo LamRim Saji do the Jiba Tamang Lomachita Lanchita Shin to then Lochita then the Lochita Battle Tayutan Hebelan Kua Hebelan Tumus Nise Tan Hebelan Sumo de Madubaina Chibichunga the Tonga Laja about Lojan Sutan Ding Andi the Tonga Laja Lojan Chibichimbi Laja about Lojan Song is a Marba. So the what the LamRim Chong da Chuju Chibusung Shibashas, LamRim da Chibichungu Lang, Ding Lang, Chibichibi Lang, what this one is about that the Ma Laring Jibashi Marba. That Kanju Tanju, that Galo, the Chibichungu Lang, Ding Lang, Chimbi Lang and Dudus, as Marba, Teabu Shedu Ina, and as a Kanju Tanju to the Mumbai. Inche Tulio Mare, and the Perky Tulio Are, and the Berry Shaken Come, Berry Sheba United, Luna Katu Koya Cabres, and what the Lari, Inche Tulio Are, Landry Inche Tulio Are, Tea Dunda Yabangabaina, Tea Dunda Nedus, Johnson Chun Duisha, Peden Levashi Jasuans. Kanju Tanju Chu, June, and Nagalo, the Landry, Chongon, the Chibusum, the Hotan Duty,
Chu the London, Chilokalasone, in Jason.
What the Lord?
Okay. Thank you. So once again, we will be looking at Lama Tsong-kha-pa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And then when we look at the major outline of the text, when we get to the fourth point at the beginning, we find that point that says how to lead students in the actual instructions. So then beyond that point, we begin to find the categories of how to rely upon the teacher that is the root of the path, and then how students train their minds once having relied upon the teacher. So then when we get to that second point of how students train their minds after having relied upon the teacher, we find two points that are made. An exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, and then the actual way that one takes advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So then when we get to that second point on the actual way that students train their minds after having relied, we find that actual way dealing with the persons of three capacities. So in Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, considered the root text for the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, we find an introductory quote that states, "Understand that there are persons of three capacities, small, medium, and great. I will write clearly distinguishing their characteristics, or I will clearly define what these are." So here, Lord Atisha was speaking about what Lama Tsong-kha-pa categorized as a major heading of how the actual way to take full advantage of life of leisure and opportunity. And then we would find the alignment there. So we have three categories under that major heading: training the mind in the stages of the past shared in common with beings of small capacity, training the mind in the stages of the past shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and training the mind in the stages of the path for beings of great capacity. So this text, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and then, of course, because it is a commentary on Atisha's Lamp, we include that as well in this point, contains all of the teachings that Lord Buddha ever gave. So and as well as the authentic Indian commentaries. So here behind us we have the Kangjur, which are the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and the Tangjur, which are the authentic Indian commentaries. And these texts are all in Tibetan. And then we have some texts in English, and we have some texts in Tibetan now. But if we look at the texts in Tibetan at their gross level, many of these texts are very difficult to understand. But we can understand all of their points by looking at Lama Tsong-kha-pa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment and Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, and we will find all of the exact information. And we have these teachings now in the English language. So we can find all of this information that would be so difficult to understand, even in Tibetan, with these texts, contained in a summarized, very well-written format. And again, we have these texts in English. So Lama Tsong-kha-pa, in paying homage to Lord Atisha in the LamRim Duden, compares the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment to an ocean. It says, because it gathers the streams of all of the illustrious classics. So it is like a great ocean, because all of the rivers of the classic texts converge into this work. So this is why Lama Tsong-kha-pa compares it to an ocean, and is referring to the teachings for beings of three capacities, and those containing all of those excellent classics, and showing the actual way to engage in those instructions. So it's not only beneficial at one level, at our level here, it was very beneficial for Tibetans who couldn't understand these great classics as easily either. So they were then presented with the beauty of the teachings for beings of three capacities: the pathways for beings of small capacity, the pathways for beings of medium capacity, and the pathways for beings of great capacity, allowing for a clearer, easier understanding of what the implicit meaning of these difficult texts was.
다 집을 중을라 다 집을 중을라 다 가데 건조선을 자손도 근데 뭐 기본 수준 가도도 소마도는 대발을 샤당시야도 돼 집을 중을다 통문나도 되기서스 what 된도를 나서 버렸어 된도를 하다 멜리제야도 되어요바이나 아니 전도야 아버지 뭐 기본 수준 가도도 소마도는 대발을 샤당시바이나 아니 하다 멜리제는 거서 말이야 된도를 나서 버렸어.
So when we look at what the actual pathway that leads to the higher realms of existence, this is what we're dealing with when we're speaking to the teachings, training the mind in the stages of the past shared in common with beings of small capacity. These teachings are teachings that lead to the higher realms of the humans, gods, and demigods. And these practices that are prescribed are as follows: going for refuge to the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, engaging in ethical behavior which abandons 10 non-virtuous activities, and then engaging in an acknowledgement of one's downfalls if one has wavered or engaged in any among those negativities. So by engaging in these practices, one is engaging in the pathways shared in common with beings of small capacity, and therefore engaging in the causes for the higher realm rebirth, or the pathways that lead to that higher realm rebirth.
What the Magawa Juting as one Mandra Landy, but Magajubu City, the Dulu,
So the 10 non-virtuous deeds, we would say, are the pathways which lead to the lower realms of cyclic existence, and the ethical discipline which abandons those 10 non-virtuous activities we would say would be the pathways that lead to the higher realms of existence.
What done did not that Tabi long is Tabamara, Kudunga, then Dunga Papi Dembo, then Kunju Papi Dembos, that Dunga Demba, the Kunju Demba, Bombi, and the Tabatu Landela, and then Rabason Jaguars, Rabason de Donila, maybe Sinet Latoni, and Chuting Rabason de Nyana Abichevaina, and the Kudunga Bombi Tabandu, Tabi Lance.
So the next category are the stages of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And these are pathways which lead one to liberation, a freedom from cyclic existence. This allows one to be free from the suffering of samsara. So the Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, and this is the superior truth of path. So the Buddha made this presentation and stated the potential for liberation by relying on or meditating upon a path which is the pathway of the three highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And by means of doing so, one can eradicate the suffering of cyclic existence and achieve liberation.
What was here, no years, what the monsoon do, what the Mexico, not the Bamaruba, made the Bamaruba. Not the Bamaruba to be shared there, and what the Danzini, not the Bamaruba, Danzini, Taba drinking Lunas. They use about 10 lazy kunju, Numobi kunju, then doing any waters. Don't need to be shared there, the Bamaruba Chesuna. And the Denzil learned who Taba dream I miss Yesuna, Taba Denzil learned. Then it laid on your more no dunga Taban Raja what the
So the reason for when we look at the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we find many negations that are being made. We find that there is no eye, there is no ear, no nose, etc. Here, these negations are being made to negate the lack of true establishment of these subjects. Here, these negations are made because it is the grasping at the true establishment of things which creates the afflictions and the karma, and therefore creates the suffering of cyclic existence. It's by applying the antidote or the harmer to the wrong view that grasps at true establishment that one is able to undo that process. So the grasping at true establishment of the eye or the ear is very similar to the grasping at a rope as being a snake in a dimly lit room. The only thing that will harm that wrong idea is the true perception that the rope is an actual rope and it is not a snake. And in the case of the grasping at the eye as being truly established, the only harmer to that is the idea that things are not truly established because they dependently originate. And by recognizing their lack of true establishment, one is then able to abandon the afflictions, that then therefore abandon the karma, and then therefore abandon cyclic existence and achieve the state of liberation based on the correct understanding of the lack of true establishment of things.
다 사제 고모 토발라드네 what you 가르쳐거래 다드네 까말라실라 고네 바발레 아니 해지 자와 샤주 생지죠 터지 버리신 봐 송라 때네 아니 사제그레스 사제 고모 토발라 주도송 차오그레스 고네 바발도 고네 바발
닌지 자와
디자 니제도 마시 진진진서 용어샤마 힌지세로와 어디 샤주생 자와이바다데 두 니진 버거다 샤주생 자와제
그래서
근데 샤주생 대바 침비 고마르베 샤주생도 공부레스 근데 샤주생 공부하다제 사제도 말에 터지 버르듯이 봐스 시즈 버버전도 chen 버버전 어디 냐래 제기나 근데 사제그레스 어디 손 말베.
So how does one achieve the state of liberation? And we find in Kamala Shila's Gomrim, the medium stages of meditation, the state Kamala Shila's stages of meditation, we find the point that at the root of the ability to achieve complete enlightenment or Buddhahood, we find compassion. So compassion is at the root which gives rise to the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that then can be coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness, or the wisdom realizing emptiness, and then these two serve as method and wisdom and allow a practitioner to be able to achieve the state of complete enlightenment or Buddhahood based on this union of the wisdom realizing emptiness and bodhicitta, but at the root of the bodhicitta we find compassion.
This is
stated.
What the Chungondin shows Jimson the Shivers or days are Marva, turned out what the duties are what that, and Chimchung the Tonga larger Valuja with Sweetla Sambajan with the Samba Jivitse, Telalu Seva, Sambajan went to La, Jidin Shema Jibatan, Jidin Shema de taught them by Nietzsche, Jidin Shema de taught them at the La, John Dutan in the Marva.
That's so?
Yeah.
So then, when we begin then with that first topic of training the mind in the stages of the past shared in common with beings of small capacity, we have that is our first major heading in the outline of this text. Under that, we find development, the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity is the first point. There are three. The next is the measure of that training of thought of a person of small capacity. And then the third is dispelling any misconceptions related to a person of small capacity. So these are the 3 points that are made. And then under the category of the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, we find 2 points. Developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives. And then the second point, relying on a means for achieving happiness in one's next life. So the top Demba, the reliance upon method. So this is the section we're currently dealing with, the reliance upon method. And in that, we find 2 major headings. First, going for refuge, the excellent entrance into, or the gateway into the instructions. And the second point, developing faith and conviction in karma and its results. So these are the 2 points that are under that major heading of the person of the reliance upon the method for a person of small capacity.
And Jetan Josun to Josun Loja Jemarva.
That's so.
Josun Jo. That John then Reverie and Reverie Jugu is Marva.
That's so.
Jutele, Pukuchu Chileson Amalchine, Josun Rola, Gina Amal Chegu. You know Amal Josun Runo. Tenajing Asung Asung doing it down, Chaganachi doing Santan Azina Yungurva. Sell the job in Nebate, Shajatuba Tabula. You have the issue until Johnson just what things matter.
less so. So the LamRim, great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, then deals with 4 categories related to refuge, the gateway into the instruction. So the first point that's made is the cause of going for refuge. The second point that's made is based on that, the objects to which you go for refuge. Next is the commitments, or going for refuge by way of differentiation. Hold on a second. I lost it for a second. Oh, that's right. The way you go for refuge and then the precepts for going for refuge, or the actual commitments of refuge. So when we begin with the causes of going for refuge, refuge is a result. So all results necessarily depend upon their causes. So refuge being a result, it needs causes. So there are 2 specific causes that allow for the arisal of this faith and conviction in refuge. The first is fear. In here, this is referring to fear of the various types of suffering of the lower realms, the various types of suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and so forth. So these are what one develops a state of fear about. And then the second part, faith of conviction, one develops a faith and conviction in Buddha Shakyamuni, being able to protect one from his or her fears of those various types of suffering that one has established as his or her object of fear. So these 2 then become the cause of going for refuge. And an example is given when a child encounters a dog and becomes fearful. The child at that point becomes very fearful and scared of the dog. So this becomes similar to that first cause. And then he or she runs to his or her parents for protection. And this is the faith and conviction that the child has in his or her parents to be able to protect him or her. So this is a common example to explain how one is fearful of the lower realms in birth, aging, sickness, and death, and develops a faith and conviction and goes towards the Buddha for protection.
다 저선도 샤자 도바다베 가서 가르쳐 줘 도그르즈나 안 샤자 도바데 본녀모 받으시 제바 타지 본생 바레스 아네 제지발에 저 털게 바레스 시제 타젤 메비 제지 첨부 요아레스 근데 폐타마다 타지게 되시그레스 주센제 타자 저수요 그래서 어디서 말이야.
So the reason that the Buddha is an appropriate object for our refuge is because of 4 points that are made. First, he has mastered his fears. He has gotten rid of all of the obstructions to omniscience as well as the afflictive obstructions. So he is no longer bound by any afflictions or imprints. This is the first point. The second point is that he is skilled, master of skill. Because of state of omniscience and so forth, the Buddha is the most skilled teacher, or the skilled scholar, skillful master. So this is the second point. The third point is that the Buddha has compassion for all beings. So the Buddha has this great compassion for sentient beings. And the fourth point about that great compassion is that it is not biased, because if beings have benefited the Buddha or not benefited the Buddha still has this desire to help, this desire and this compassion for them. So benefited or not benefited, the Buddha doesn't discriminate.
다 저수는 추들라 연대 시비군의 저수로와 차바 시비군 저수로와 킬남비군의 저수로와 제도 모마이군 저수로와 어디 이제도 맞바
Lesso.
다 연대 시비군 저수로 상지 주연대 취주연대 근위 주연대 시비군에
Lesso.
근데 근데 연대도 야부시비이나 저도 야부용고지로와
Lesso.
연대 시비군 저수로 어디 참말바
Lesso.
다 차바 시비군 저수로와 들라 두말바 Chenrezig cheba, tene kaza, mebi cheba, rubi cheba, jesu rubi cheba, sono pi cheba watene duwa. Wat tu sheda kabading samare. jawab gadi jatsu wa tasu lel habres on deshi siramdu lare seji madra od lel habres on deshi siramdu
na ire
machu rabar biji la saro
so when we get into the actual way to go for refuge, there's 4 points that are made. Going for refuge by knowing the excellent qualities, going for refuge by knowing the distinctions, going for refuge through commitment or through assertion, what one asserts. And then fourth, going for refuge by not acknowledging others' refuge. So when we look at the first point of going for refuge by way of knowing the excellent qualities, we find that there are 3 divisions. First, knowing the excellent qualities of the Buddha, knowing the excellent qualities of the Dharma, and knowing the excellent qualities of the Sangha. So we've previously gone through all of those categories of the excellent qualities. And then we get to the next points that are made, going for refuge by way of knowing the distinctions. And the distinctions that are referred to here are 6 specific points that are made. So the first point that's made is the distinction relative to the definitions. So the definition of that are the characteristics. Distinction relative to enlightened activities, distinction relative based on devotion, distinction based on practice, distinction based on recollection, and then distinction based on increase of merit. And then we find in one of the first Dalai Lama's texts, common Sunam Jatso, Gongyal Rinpoche. The second. Sumba. Sunan Sumba. In the third Dalai Lama's text, we find an explanation of this that makes it very clear and easy to understand. We don't have this text with us today, but in this section of knowing distinctions with the 6 categories, we find these are made to be very clear.
Kelambe kuni chawsu rowa tamarga ane sonje kunju chaw tenpa pu dadan damres ane chu de pendan da chaw ngoy che gani de chaw rubin daru wa dana san tane chawsu rowa dala kelambe kuni chawsu rowa ting samarga
Go detsi anje surulang nga ngi semsa solyo
kelambe kuni chawsu rowa dala ta dujang chaw tenpa pu sonje de chaw tenpa pu penpa damres chaw tenpa pu che ane Pembal Dadal can see the TV never chose Dadal chosen over. Dadal chosen the Dadal Tisha behind the Mazana Nasata Maro. Sanji Sonja Chud Yalan Jena and the Magijum Sudan Zubana Jena and then Gasmo Dungala Sultan Ugajano. Magina or the Tattoo Major, that Chud hand on me. Then the children with the Duke and you are coming at the Jessa Chudunam Marva Damapan. Yeah.
Then Chu going sugar.
Chu going to hand on money.
Okay. So
okay. Now
yeah, that's it. So this going for refuge through commitment or going for refuge through assertion it shows how we establish the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. What we assert them as, or what we commitment here, but commitment. Power of commitment. So we assert that the Buddha is like a doctor, because like a doctor who is able to diagnose various illnesses such as TB or tuberculosis. The Buddha is able to eradicate our various forms of suffering which these diseases could be compared to. And then when we go to a doctor gives us some medication. After there's been a diagnosis of what the sickness that we have is, and then it becomes our choice. If we take the medicine, we can be cured of our illness. But if we don't take the medicine that the doctor prescribes, then there's not a possibility of being freed of the illness. So here, the Dharma we assert, is like medicine that if we practice it, we can achieve a state beyond suffering. But we can't. And we're now in the small scope. So if we don't take the medicine prescribed within these teachings for small capacity, we will not be able to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence, just in the same way that our disease cannot be purified or eradicated without taking the medicine. And then the community, or those aspiring to virtue, are those who are like spiritual friends or helpful friends that aid us in our journey, or in our path, or on our path, as a nurse would help a doctor.
We're on page
189 in English. Let me get my book out. Okay, just give me 1 minute. Jadan Juni. Dumbi Chepa Kaba.
That Dumbi Chepa, Dumbi Kilabi Chabatero, Kilabi Chabaje, Kilabi Chabatero, that was Dumba with the hand on Jadu the Rusum Marbe.
Sanjay
But this one the Kabandus and Dua Jason did. Dua Jason did the living and you Marbe. You think you. Let me think you the song to Dua Jason did. Jason did the song to Usere. Jason did the song Bataro, illicit to Kusultans and Kusulta.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this section now in English, beginning on page 189. And we find Dharma Mitras, Lopun, got it? Puike? Lopun Yunten. But in the Sanskrit, we find Dharma Mitras. So it's the commentary on the Sutra on Discipline, the Vinaya Sutra Tika. So this is the sutra, and it states, going for refuge through commitment means upholding the Buddha as the teacher of refuge, the teaching nirvana as the actual refuge, and the community as those who assist us to attain refuge.
Nabi Tembat Chure, and Shiribi Tembat the members, Nabi Tembat Chure, Shiribi Tembat members, and Nabi Tembat Hokan Gaya Chure, and Shiribi and Tembalas of the Logan to Kaza to the members, Sunu, those home. Dembi Chaba, Dembi Chaba, and Dua.
Lessa.
J'ai de maman eu Josu Swan, Nabatan, Shibi, Dumbatans, and Dembatan, Tella Ruba Naji, Chume Shenes, Tella Ruba Chume. Nami Dumbatan, Shibi Dumbal Chume.
Lesso.
Nami Dembatan, Shibi Dumbal Chume.
Lesso.
Nami Dembal Rubi Kanzatan, Shibi Dembal Rubi Kanzata, Chume Chabat Shigu.
Lesso.
What does one matter? What do you to do?
So Rinpoche is saying here, when we begin in this section, it's called going for refuge by refusing to acknowledge other refuges. Then we find the differences here that are pointed out about Buddhists and non-Buddhists. So here, the point is to learn is this Buddhism? Is this Buddha Dharma? Is this not Buddha Dharma? If it's Buddha Dharma, then it's Buddhism. If it's outsider Dharma and it isn't Buddha Dharma, then it's not Buddha Dharma. So here we're establishing what the teachers are teaching and what the distinctions are between these different teachers and what they are teaching. So here it says, going for refuge by refusing to acknowledge other refuge means, first of all, understanding the differences in worth between Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachers, teachings, and disciples, etc. Kanga logu. Okay, that's good then.
No.
For them, for then you will uphold only the three jewels as your refuge and refuse teachers, teachings, and disciples that do not accord with them. The distinctions between the Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachers, etc., are as follows. So here, now we start to present the differences or the distinctions between a Buddhist teacher in the presentation and a non-Buddhist or an outsider teacher and the presentation. Okay. Less so. So here we're going to read the distinction of the teacher. The distinction of the teacher. The Buddha is without fault and has perfected good qualities, but the teachers of other religions are the opposite of this. So here, the point that's being made is that the Buddha has eradicated all afflictions, has eradicated all the obstructions to omniscience or the obstacles to objects of comprehension. So these have all been eradicated. So the Buddha is without fault and has, because there are no affliction, has perfected all good qualities and has achieved the state of all-knowing, whereas other teachers have not achieved these states. And then there begins to become an explanation of what that means. And then we find a quote from Pakdu, which is called The Praise of the Exalted One. And the story is behind this actual quote that there were two brothers who were followers who were sent by their mother up to the top of the mountain to ask Shiva a question and to make offerings and so forth to Shiva. It was the Himalaya region between Nepal and Tibet where this has taken place. So these two brothers make a journey to make offerings to Shiva, to ask questions of Shiva. And they make their way to the top of the mountain, and they find Shiva taking refuge in Lord Buddha. And Shiva consults with the two brothers and says to go for refuge to Lord Buddha. So they make their way back down the mountain and then write praise of the Exalted One. So this quote here comes from originally non-Buddhist, who then was advised by Shiva Ishvara to then go for refuge to the Buddha. So that's the history behind this quote.
What the what is my words? Hindus Kangaribin Trijan Dibata
It's the
Sono Martin Europe. Pebatan Nabani Parut Karachi.
Less
two Kangote
less so
two Kangate Shiba blessed.
Less so. So this is why the Ganges River is considered so, this is the reason why the Ganges River is considered blessed, because Shiva is at the top of these mountains and they melt down into the Ganges River, and Shiva is blessing the Ganges as this process takes place. So this is asserted why, as one of the whys, the Ganges River is so sacred to the Hindus. Shiites.
Oh, these are that dana chaba phado janghe ko wate khoni ko wate chaba phado ko long jang do khoni zangsha phado de jira wada
Lessa.
tene meti jeji kasa chaba phado reba chaba phado les
Dan Dumba
jen pone jode chola chosu ches dane tab de Pinjani Jirota, Dan Tumbajan, Jidim Lajan Dal Chosen Rumes, Bone, and Sanjil Chosen Ruins, Dan Tumbajan Bone, Judicial Choses, Tumbajan Bonangal, Sanjil Chosen Ru, Jusen Karasana, Teji Ledo Shena, Jusen Karasmarbe, Teji Led Shena, Jusenti Womarbe, Matutasi on the G Shes, Teji Shena. Jusen yoris, Shajatuba Chune, Germangala, Yundede, Yomoba Shiji, Germanga, Yomare, and then also do what them in the Jusen to go on Zamara. Or did you
So here then we have a reason given then from, and this again is as a result of these two brothers coming back down the mountain and then writing this praise in the Exalted One. So as an effort of that. So it says, having forsaken other teachers, I go to you for refuge, O Bhagavan. If someone should ask why, so Rinpoche made it clear that this is framed in the debate context. So if someone says, the statement is this, translators note, the statement is this, someone would say, chichir, and that would mean why. So this is written in almost a debate format. It says, if someone says chichir, someone says, why is that? Then the sign that you can establish, it is because, so it's almost like the subject statement and then reason here. So we say, I go for refuge in the Bhagavan. So it's the going for refuge in the Bhagavan. So, and if someone says, why? The sign is because the Bhagavan has no faults and possesses all good qualities. And then if someone says, why does the Bhagavan possess all, have no faults and possess all good qualities? The statement is because the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience have been removed. And then we find more from the praise to the Exalted One.
Madijin Sherubi Pachat Mobatevis, San Mobatam, Theatre, Tangonchula, Sanjil Chos Mondus, Jusecaras and Dogs or Gonchula, Dogs and Tebachurosa, Tebachigandus, Theatre, Taji Chem maybe to teach the last sentence, Taji Chem maybe, and the Sherubi, Pachatu, San Down Jundu, Germandus, Juntum. Ruti Junji last ending. Sanla Naji Jun may be Dumba Church Modon. That's Hanjik Sanla Naji Jun may be Sajil Junda Yomaris, the Jun member there, should have 2 Maris. Dumba Church Modon was what things are my
The next section, again, is speaking to these brothers who've had this realization, are speaking to this. The more I reflect on other non-Buddhist traditions, the greater becomes my faith, O protector. Their minds are ruined by the faults of tenets. or by faulty doctrines, devised by those who are not omniscient. Those whose mind are ruined cannot even see you, faultless teacher. So here, these are disciples who have been given wrong views and wrong tenets that weren't devised by someone who had removed the obstructions to omniscience. So the only beings who have done so are those Buddhas. And the Buddha cannot present a false tenet, whereas those who are not omniscients can. So it says those minds who are ruined by these wrong tenets can't even see that the Buddha is faultless because their minds have been so obscured by these wrong ideas.
What the Shajatuba the Takashugurta? Tashatuba the Tumba Churis. Shajatuba Shiribi Temba Nagamare, Tumba Churis, Shiribi Tumba Derete, Tumba Chumares, Shajatuba Tabu Chu, Tumba Chu Inte, and Yomo the Shiji, Dibi Chun Mangala, and then Yusuba Imbe, Buddhist and Chimar, Buddhist and Chiji. And then Shajatube and Kaza. Yana Joe Nabajin turns about none Lujiba Marva. Shajatuba Chu, Tumba Chu Inte. Danger wants to become a imbezer. Danger wants to become a Yitan, but the same Nibache, what the good and Disamarva. Danger wants to become a imbezer. Temba imbezer, but the same Nijeroa. Then, and Shajatuba Tabu the Hailaris, Haila. Shajatuba the Haila images and Karasana, and Dunjun Tinlashon, the Saging, Lumen Dabu Tagi to Lasu. Sina Trebin are Cheruba, Lumbin Jena, Chejan Kanko, Toimela Yemi Messaging, Zebi Chubenji, Kankishabi Gubetensheva, Ton Haila Chancelos, Jelmish Leshin Mongo to Yorua, Dejun, Tinlashon, Dejun Sana Honju Mar Honju, Shibaro, Dejun Shiba, Dejun Shibare, Tinlashon Sana, Tinlashon Samba Samba, Kushika.
Brahma?
Kushika. Then you tin la shunta. Sejing is Samba Mar Samba. Samba Seji Gungal Chibas Luji. Then you tin la shunta, Sejing, then you Shibaje. Then tin la shunba, Tayo Jaji, Sejing Sambaje. Taguto Chanju is Chanju. Le main d'Abu du Garanjo. Le main d'Abu du Garanjo. What the Jidem had to say, you are there, and then also, but the someone light into a light, but you could le, and about this tornado, much is in a good light to 10 little night little pentu matu, Yamashasun pentu maro. Saji Yamanabades, Jidem had to you then bagel the little light and up. What the Sanji told you in Jidem Latinalo, Sanji Jones was. Sanji showed the Shulajan and Jones were. These are set to what
lesson. So then, how do we establish the Buddha Shakyamuni as this word teacher? And this word teacher now in this context is the teacher. So when we're speaking now about establishing the teacher of Dharma, this word teacher then becomes the translator's note, the, with a big, the teacher. How do we establish this? So we first establish it by means of statements with reason. So we say the subject, Buddha Shakyamuni, is the teacher because he has eradicated all of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. He has gotten rid of all faults and taken on all excellent qualities where others have not. So this is the first sign and reasoning that we can establish that Buddha Shakyamuni is the teacher. The second subject in establishing it, we find in the second chapter of Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika Karika, where he states that you alone have taught the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths have been taught by you alone. You independently. You are the only one who has explained faultlessly these Four Noble Truths. So here, this is the second point that's made. And the third point that's made, can be made, is that Buddha Shakyamuni is a refuge of the gods, of the worldly gods. So when we see that even the great gods, and I bring it every week, the first section of Lama Tsong-kha-pa's Essence of Eloquence deals with 5 specific Hindu deities and speaks to it in a way that says those deities are like fireflies compared to a light. And the deities are Shiva and Brahma. It's right in the beginning of it. I don't know the Sanskrit words. I could give you the Tibetan. Shiva. I have a we'll do this way. Let me just see. Let's see. Give me 1 minute. Cookie tea. We're going to take a short break. It's cookie time, and listen, So now here we are establishing Buddha Shakyamuni as the teacher. So this applies the same, though, for all of the other Buddhas. So Buddha, the medicine Buddha, and all of the other Buddhas have this same quality because they're Buddhas. So we're referring to Shakyamuni, but it applies to all the Buddhas. So then when we begin to formulate this in a dialectical way, we would say the subject, Buddha Shakyamuni, is the teacher to go for the Bhagavan, the teacher to go the teacher because, I'm trying to do it, the teacher because he has abandoned all faults and possesses all excellent qualities. The Buddha is the teacher because of abandoning the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So this is the first sign that we can use, or a perfect reason to establish Buddha as the teacher. The second point that's made is that the Buddha alone taught the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha was the only one who presented the Four Noble Truths. So the subject Buddha is the teacher because he alone taught the Four Noble Truths, according to Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika Karika. The subject Buddha Shakyamuni is the teacher because he is the refuge for the gods. So the worldly gods go for refuge to Buddha. So these are 3 reasons that establish the validity of stating that Buddha is the teacher.
So once the
worldly gods see the excellent qualities of the Buddha, they immediately go for refuge to the Buddha. Recognize these excellent qualities, they go for refuge to the Buddha. Nima. So the worldly gods do have excellent qualities, but those excellent qualities are similar to a firefly, and the Buddha's excellent qualities similar to the sun.
What is that? That and Tembi Chaba, that Tembi Chaba. Sanjig Temba de Shuri Temple Chure, and what the Chu Yimba there. That's Sanjig Temba and Tembi Chaba, that the Mangazo Chilun and the Hijab Mara. Tembi Chaba, Jayu Temba, La de Drebu Deva, Toba dance, and Jayu Temba, Sanjig Temba, Tembi Jusheba Latene, and Sanjig Temba de La Devare, Drebu Deva Yungaris, Deva Tuba dance, kuyu junli dubas sonji ke tema nyalan chigi ina tene kuyu dul tabi lan kuwal dun taba tugar wada kuyu junli duba tang nyumo ba naba shangwa shebas ta dame tubi shera tang wad tene ke gomba la tene ane nyumo ba na shangwa won tugaris tando malo atang tando na je taba ndoba na ji taba tu tugare logma loyo mares tando malo atang taji du gawa res nyeba tabar sheba shela sa jusen baroda te zosa shiru tamban tele dubates shiru tamba zoga tele dubares cheba bhadule kale choji tamba ne de dwa to jeba tele mayu sin choji yulu la ne rodda shedan hayu ga ote teba ji ju shan ma ba ala tasid ma ji lu shan na ji jana
senge jilom and drabagu. The distinction of the teaching. Conqueror's teaching allows you to attain its goal of bliss through a joyful path. It stops the stream of cyclic existence, clears away the afflictions, does not mislead those who desire liberation. So there's no mistake in this pathway leading to liberation. It is completely virtuous, so there is nothing ignoble or non-virtuous related to it, and it clears away all faults, all the faults of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. The non-Buddhist teachings are the opposite, meaning they do not qualify under these categories. So then we have another quote from the Praise of the Exalted One that says, "Your teaching causes one to attain bliss through the joyful. Therefore, O lion of speakers, intelligent beings have faith in your tradition."
What does Haji Temba de Shrubi Temba Chebat Chures? That's Haji Temba de Karsha. Haji Temba shows lava ina, Haji Temba la Longi Temba to be Temba Ni, Haji Temba la Longi Temba to be Temba Ni, Longi Temba shows na, and the Haji Kata. Ti gonde ke tenju to sukngalo longi temba je
Sanjay
ka dang ti gonde tenju to sumar
okay
ka dang tenju to sukngalo
long
Sanjay gonde ke ka dang tenju to so longi temba sares longi temba je rawa longi temba Sanjay ka je ti gonde tana ngatu tenju nalenta kheba su tenju yo mar wa to so je longi temba res longi temba longi chugo sana sanji ka chugo longi chugo sana sanji ka da longi chugo tenchi longi temba da ana sanji ka da te gone ke tenju chamal kon marba what did you learn?
So I missed one thing from before. So it's in dependence upon the scripture that the Buddha has taught that one is able to get rid of the root of cyclic existence. So it's in dependence upon these tenets, on the scripture. So here the distinction of the teaching is that in the dependence upon, teaching here could be translated dependence on scripture. Scripture related to specifically this Buddha Dharma, and in dependence upon it, one is able to achieve all of these points that are made. So maybe I missed that. If I didn't, I said it twice. So then we get into this next quote that states, "Your teaching causes one to attain bliss through the joyful. Therefore, O line of speaker, intelligent, have faith in your tradition." So when we look at scripture, when we look at this word here, teaching or scripture, we can explain what that is. So if it is a scriptural truth, then it is necessarily a pronouncement of Lord Buddha or any among the authentic Indian commentaries that speak to the meaning of Lord Buddha's pronouncements. So this falls under the scriptural truth. And then there is realizational truth. When we look at the word scriptural turning of the wheel, So if we explain it as a scriptural turning of the wheel, it is necessarily, specifically Buddha's pronouncements. But if it's scriptural truth, it can combine Buddhist pronouncements as well as the authentic Indian commentaries. Longi
temba to longi chugos ni go do. Longi chugo. Chugo goas. Sanji kol dom ko baba od chugo la marba. Chugo longi chugo la da. Longi chugo sanji kares. Longi chugo in sanji kai cha. Sanji kai in longi chugo cha.
So when we look at the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma, if it is scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma, it is necessarily Buddhist speech. If it is Buddhist speech, it is necessarily scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma. So this is the basis when we speak to what the scriptural turning of the wheel refers to.
Tobi temba tobi chugos ni santang udwa. Tobi temba sana ane tobi temba sana sabasung nyale. Sabasung ane tobi temba sabasung nyale tela tobi temba lagres marba. Tobi temba hasung nyale tes kontan jabe marba. Tobi temba labi chutin jilaba labi dingan jilaba labi sheda jilaba nyale tela tobi temba. What to be temba? That to be chugosana, Lai Micharata, Netujilang, Raja Jilang, Shanchu Sembi Lang, Sajig Lang, Lai not to be chugu Michao, to be chugu in the Lai Michaus, the Jija.
Okay. So then we get to the realizational truth and realizational turning of the wheel. So those are the two topics. So we had scriptural truth and realizational truth, and scriptural turning of the wheel and realizational turning of the wheel. So we dealt with scriptural truth and scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma, and scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma is referring to the Buddhist speech necessarily, again, the three baskets of the Buddhist doctrine. So then if we look at the realizational truth, this is referring to the three highest higher trainings, the highest higher trainings in ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So this would be considered scriptural truth. If we're speaking of scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma, then this is necessarily true paths. So if it is scriptural realizational of the Dharma, scriptural turning of the wheel of, scriptural realization of the doctrine, it is necessarily true paths. If it is a true path, it is necessarily realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma. So the true paths are synonymous with scriptural turning, true paths are synonymous with realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma.
당아주 싫어니 뭐 가지 때만 대다 온 가든 바랑가드 바라상가드 부디소스 말베 니 되게는 톨랑졸랑 몰로랑나 라제 톨랑졸랑 몰로랑나 샹생게 톨랑졸랑 안에 몰로랑 다 티제스 말베 랑가들 두비추고 다 두비추고.
So when we look at the scriptural realizational so when we look at the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma, the lam demba lam palam lam
Lion,
tuchena. Okay, tuchena. Okay, you got the tomam. Got.
Yeah.
I just the jumala. So the pathways that are the realizational turning of the wheel of dharmas are what we find when we look at the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge and the mantra that is contained within it. It says, Teata Om Gate Gate Parasangati Bodhi Soha. So this is referring to any among the five paths of the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. So here, when we go back to the, just to make sure it's clear, the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma refers to paths, not necessarily Arya paths. So I just clarified it with Rinpoche, just so I didn't misspeak. And he said, of course, because the path of accumulation isn't a superior path. So I'll get to that. So within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, there is a mantra that says, Teata Om Gate. This first Gate is referring to any among the 5 paths of a hearer, a solitary realizer, or a bodhisattva. They are all named the same thing. So it's the path of accumulation for any among those 3. The path of preparation is the second Gate in the Heart Sutra mantra, and this is the path of preparation for any among those 3 here, solitary realizers or bodhisattvas. Paragate is referring to the path of seeing for any among the here, solitary realizers or bodhisattvas. Parasamgate is, and that's the path of seeing. Parasamgate then is referring to the path of meditation of any among the here, solitary realizers or bodhisattvas. And Bodhisoha is referring to the path of no more learning for here, solitary realizers or bodhisattvas. So any among these 5 paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, or no more learning for any among the here, solitary realizers or bodhisattvas are included within the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma.
What the chuku de la longo chuku to be chuku ni yoris. Mzelo, don't be down chu nani this, Nami chu, chuku kolo the ni yoris, to be chuku the longo chuku ni. Don't be down chu nani this, long down to be danido. That longi, that gaza, longi temper down to be temper ni, longi temper to be temper zemi sekars. The Zinche dans un deux, l'ontier de nous sont tirés, de nous sont des sous la malinière, sous le pachia, ou dans le Jebaïna, longue tema de Zimbares, longue tema de Zinche dans, manger dans, sous ce que manger benzine, j'ai le nier, j'ai le pachier, ou dans le Jebaïna, tout vite, longue tema de Zimbares.
Less so.
L'ontier de nous sont tirés dans son content jambéang. L'ontier de nous sont cheba de nieba, gendal nieba, chushoa, and then social gen pashiva, or the general long tema zebares.
Less so.
Lonchu denus on cheyetas. Denus on gen cheba the ragi nieba, the chebaina, long tema zebares.
So we find a quote from Guntan Jambayang, who also supported that the realizational truth was referring to the 3 highest higher trainings, just as a quote source. And we're finding, actually we'll start with the first quote. The first quote is from Vasubandhu from the Abhidharma Kosha, where he supports that there are 2 specific truths, scriptural and realizational. And then Guntan Jambayang goes on to say that when one is explaining any among the material contained within the 3 baskets to those who are listening, then this becomes the scriptural truth.
To be temper zebi set shows na, and the Labasonia Legena, Turinji Lava, Tony Levitins Lava, Shera Labatonia Jebaina, and to be temper zimaris.
So then the next point that's made is that by the realizational truth happens by practicing the 3 highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, and by practicing we then grasps those. Zimba, we've acquired those, and then this becomes a realizational truth. So it's an acquirement of these by practicing these. So the teaching, the scriptural truth is the actual teaching of the 3 baskets that one implements, and then the 3 highest higher trainings are the scriptural realization that cause one to realize these higher trainings. So the realization of these highest higher trainings. So then we can now Demba Chuku. Okay, so what is the Okay, so then we can then start to look at these all in a debate format. What is the difference between the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma and the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma? Is it 3 possibilities, 4 possibilities, mutually exclusive, or synonymous? What is the difference between scriptural truth and realizational truth? Is it 3 possibilities, 4 possibilities, mutually exclusive, or synonymous? So then we can begin to slowly look at things in this fashion by comparison and understand them.
다 롱기 죽을 다 두비 죽을 제가 가도서나 비진 개와 있어. 롱기 죽을 이나 조이고 다이. 그 소지가 있는 다이.
띵이사.
다 롱기 두비 죽을 이나 라이고 라. 두비 죽을 이나 두비 죽을라 라이 비차스 셰바이 맞아면서. 어떻선
셰바이 맞아.
저도 맞아 산다.
So Sheba Yim Chap Macha.
도비 죽을 라인 비쳐서 다 제정래. 도비 죽을 라인 비쳐. 라인 도비 죽을 비쳐서. 기자 매바지. 다도 라라 셰바인 아우구스.
Sheba dan Zu Gewa.
What is
it? Okay. So then when we look at the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma and we compare it to the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma, we must come up with that they are mutually exclusive, no? Because when we look at scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma, it is form because it is sound. It is speech that is coming out. And when we look at realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma, we're necessarily speaking to paths. So then we ask ourselves, is path consciousness or not? Because consciousness and form are mutually exclusive. No answer was given to that. So if you state that if it is a path, it is necessarily consciousness,
so
if we were in the sutra tradition and the Prajnaparamita tradition, then it would be very easy for us to say that if it is a path, it is necessarily consciousness. So there wouldn't be a large debate that would have to take place in the sutra tradition if we were speaking to this. So what about in the tantric path? Is it a tantric path necessarily consciousness? So the clear body is consciousness? So the Julu, the completion stage body, the completion stage body, the clear body, is this clear body consciousness? So then if this is consciousness or not, there's a doubt, a debate that then can take place. Julu is the light body. The light body, right? The illusory body, yeah.
Julius Dakande, Tuni to be shadow USA de USA Mondroda. USA Geneva to long, Wendy. What the Julius Mondro was about.
So within the clear light mind, there is a wind element that is there. So this is this illusory body. There is this wind element in the clear light mind. So this is why there's a doubt.
What is it? That to be temba down. That to be chuku. To be chuku down, to be temba, to be chuku down, to be temba.
Longi demba dang dupi demba.
Who temba to be temba nika.
Chepagare. So then now the next is scriptural truth and realizational truth. Are they mutually exclusive?
What the Santana Kaleku Shero Kujimuta? Sharon does me don't de Mata. Shero Kamar Jam, the Kaleka Komor.
So this is for the purpose of expanding one's understanding of what these things really are. Making it larger and larger in our understanding of these points that we just look at or see. So so if you can say, what is the difference between the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma and the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma. If you don't know what the scriptural turning of the wheel of Dharma is, and the realizational turning of the wheel of Dharma is, and what this isn't and what that isn't, then it's not possible without the understanding and certainty about these things to even apply the 3-4 permutations, mutually exclusive and synonymous, because you don't know the information of what they mean. So it's important to know the information to be able to then know what, then you're able to raise doubts and expand your knowledge.
Jayu Temba Sanji Tembarwa. Jayu Temba ne Lan Deyu Drebu Dwa Tuba Dance. Lan Deyu Drebu Dwa Tuba Yinzan and Temba Chures. Shirubi Temba Chumares. Ta Lan Deyu Drebu Dwa Tuba Maisa Goja. Kui Juli Tuba. Sanji ki Temba Nyanson Lambala Dene Kui Juli Dugres. Sanji ki Temba Tubi Temba Hasun Yale Jena. And Haba Sonde Tabi Lamar, Tabi Lam. Kui Juli Duba dance, Habason Yalan Jebala Dene, Tony Lamim Shenet Laton, Chuting Lavanya Yalan Jebala Dene, Kui Juli Dun Tabatu, Tabi Lamroa. Kui Juli Duba dance, Kale Kalanu Jun Marva.
Chu Jadan
Tembi Chaba, Tamango, Tembi Chaba. Jeremy Chegdeshitroda. Jayu Temba Nala Deyu, Debu Dawa Tubatan, Larichab, each Kuzulten. Kui Juli Dubatans.
Corway Junle Dep. Okay.
Jayu Temba Nala Deyu, Debu Dawa Tubatans. Jayu Temba. Sana Sanji Temba Marve. Sanji ki Temba Longi Temba Tubi Temba Nindo. Sanji ki Temba in the Gawai Michano. Gawai in a queen Jebutele, Dawayu Ungurota. Jai Temba Nala Deyu, Jebudua to us. Jai Temba the Land Dawares, Land Dawa. Land Dawas in the Gawari the Marve Gawa. Jebudel Dawayunguris. Dawa to Baton Kaleju Kale.
So the distinction, going back to page 189, the distinction of teacher, we find the conqueror's teachings allow you to attain its goal of bliss through a joyful path. So one can eradicate suffering and achieve happiness through a pathway. Here, the pathway, what is this pathway? Pathway is the practice of the 3 highest higher trainings. The scripture, the conqueror's teaching, what is this referring to? Teaching, scripture. There are scriptural doctrine, scriptural truths and realizational truths. So scriptural and realizational truths are mutually exclusive. So it's through the conqueror's teaching that allows one to realize through the practice of the 3 highest higher trainings, which are the joyful path. So it says goal of bliss through a joyful path. The joyful path referring to the 3 highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, and the goal of bliss, the eradication of suffering, the achievement of happiness. Okay, so the subject, so if we look at signs and reasonings, the subjects, the Buddhist truth, Sanjay the Temba Chuchen.
And Temba Chuyin, Land the Indebu.
Okay, so we can say that there are other religions, this word dharma could be translated as religion, and there are other dharmas or other religions. So what makes it specific when we say the dharma in this case, and it's referring to necessarily that this type of religion, this teaching is of the conqueror. So that there's a distinction that was made. So it says the conqueror's teaching allows you to attain its goal of bliss through a joyful path. So one is able to achieve liberation based on this pathway that of the three highest higher trainings that the conqueror has presented, whereas others have not presented such.
상지 템바 추 진이바로 템바 추인데 그 줄을 두바 임베셔 상지 템바 냐래 제기나 누가 본토로다 상지 템바 냐래는 라바송여들 안에 답이 나래도 말이야 들라된 타바투도 그 줄을 두고 타바투도.
So we formulate these things in the form of a date. The subject, the Buddhist teaching, the Buddhist truth is truth because it allows you to attain liberation. Second, the subject, the Buddha's truth is truth because it stops the stream of cyclic existence. So we begin to establish all of these points Lama Tsong-kha-pa is saying as perfect reasons for establishing the Buddha as the teacher. So the Buddha is the teacher. The Buddha's truth is truth because it leads to liberation. The truth is truth because it stops the stream of cyclic existence.
다 상지 템바 추 상지 템바 추인데 뇨모 나버 샤와시베시르바 뇨모 나버 샤와시베시 뇨모 녜브르트르모
So the subject, the Buddha's truth, is the truth because it clears away the afflictions. So here's the next point that Lama Tsong-kha-pa makes, that the afflictions are eradicated by the Buddha's truth. So the Buddha's truth is the truth because it eradicates the afflictions. So properly formulated, the subject, the Buddha's truth, is the truth because of clearing away the afflictions.
상지 템바 추인데 탄도 몰로와 임베시 상지 템바라 때네 타바투투로 타바투번데 가라나 타바투안 되버요 되버여바나지 타바투투에 장 타바투번조와 인장 탄도 몰로와레스 마 타바투 모투나 로와로다.
Okay. So the subject, the Buddha's truth, is the truth because it does not mislead those who desire liberation. Those who wish to be liberated have been presented a proper pathway which will lead to that goal. Other pathways given will not lead to that goal because this with specificity was spoken by the Buddha of how to achieve liberation.
다 상지 템바 추인데 지도 거와 임베시 상지 템바 추인데 타지도 거와 임베시 말이다. 지도 거와 임베시.
So the subject Buddha's truth is the truth because it is only virtuous, completely virtuous. Virtue permeates it, only virtue.
다 상지 템바 추인데 녜바 다바시베시 뇨모바지 시지비 녜바 다바시베시.
So the Buddha's truth, the subject, the Buddha's truth is the truth because it clears away faults. What are the faults? The afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience.
다 시리비 템바 추마인데 네 라데 데버도아 투바 마인베시. 그 줄도 두바 마인베시. 뇨모 다바상 상하시바 마인베시. 탄도 몰로 마인베시. 지도 거와 마인베시. 녜바 다바시바 마인베시. 어떻게 말하거든. So
then we reverse it. The subject, non-Buddhist teachings are not the truth because they do not stop the stream of they do not lead to liberation, they do not stop the stream of cyclic existence, they do not clear away the afflictions, they mislead those who desire liberation away from liberation, and they are not necessarily completely virtuous and cannot clear away all faults.
So
these are the differences that are presented, and then J. Rinpoche has chosen to use the praise of the Exalted One as his quote to support this information.
Lande de do to ba imbeje tele mayu hasin cheje sa yulo lan runda ta she son be ta den ga dele de marda de do to je ba tele mayu sin cheje mai sang cheje 마이생거 상지 샤자토바 최지 윤로라네 론데당 시당스 어떤 가가던 뉘되마다
So then when we look at this praise and the praiseworthy, I'll just read it in its entirety. Having forsaken other teachings, I go to you for refuge, O Bhagavan. If someone should ask why, it is because you have no faults and possess all good qualities. The more I reflect on other non-Buddhist traditions, the greater becomes my faith or protector. Their minds are ruined by the faults of tenets, devised by those who are not omniscient. Those whose mind are ruined cannot see you, faultless teacher. Your teaching causes one to attain bliss through the joyful. Therefore, O lion among speakers, intelligent beings have faith in your tradition. So here it speaks to those exact same points of the ability to achieve liberation and abandon the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience in the Patu, as well as in Lama Tsong-kha-pa supporting signs and reasons. Praise and honor of one worthy of honor. 31. Injike. Chishina Puik Jalo. Rinpoche was asking who the next quote would. Varna Sut. Yeah, I don't know how to read Sanskrit. Sandra K. Puik Yomare. The Ming Drabble. The Ming Paktu, the Ming Drabble. Viene Padu Yomare, worthy of honor. So then, praise and honor of one worthy of honor. Kangalo Injike? Shilokachi? Okay, so I'm going to just read one stanza from the next part, and then we're going to just end here. The difference, and this is the praise and honor of one worthy of honor. The difference between your words, O hero, and the words of others is that the former should be adopted and the latter rejected. The former purifies and the latter defiles.
Moloa imbeji, tanto moloa imbeji. Shirubi dama tu loa es. What the lady is a marbe. Then the Luchu Baji, Shirubi dama de, Chu Mai de, Duja Hui Chu imbeji. Luchu Baji na. Church Gatan Genji si. And then Shirubi dama da, Nami dama Chebares. Tele Cheju Genji says, Tele Cheba Shubi, Ne Genyo Maris. Cheba Sanji. Sanji Temba de Shirubi Longi Temba Survata, Shirubi Temba de Shirubi Temba Chibatabi, Jusen to the response. Then the Jito Gawatis, Tajit Gawa invasion, Tajit Gawa invasion, Jito Pachu, Jelana, Church Gata Gensi, to Kale, Jemanga Sundishana, Kalejan Azare.
So Rinpoche said this would be best to do slowly later, but we'll reread it and just look at it in its a summary meaning, this stanza. We're unable to truly, clearly give the explanation in its full right now, so we're not going to. The difference between your words, O hero, and the words of others is that the former should be adopted. So the words of the Buddha should be taken on because they lead to the pathways of liberation, and the latter rejected So those do not lead to liberation. So the outsider's views are views that are misleading views. Misleading because they don't lead to liberation. The former should be adopted and the latter rejected. The former purifies and the later defiles. So we'll get to the more of that later.
And then Nabi Temal Hubat Chure, and then Shiru Temal Hubat Chumares. That is it, the Song Dogro, Chason to Masma, Shukalila Mara.
So first, we would say that the Buddha Dharma is the true Dharma. Second, is the truth. Second, we would say that the outsider's views are not the truth. And third, Sumba?
Temple Hubi. Number Sanjiva, Shiriba Chume Waras.
And it is non-mistaken relative to where it leads one to, and the non-Buddhists are mistaken relative to the result.
That's the Tangai Sutin Chibin to Shiriba Gujun Shabat Papa Inos. Tangazo Polo de Mog Nani Yorota. Gitsuitan Kolon to Domba Nyana can to Suknalo, Domba the Nyavares, Sanjeke, Shiribi Gijun Shabat Papa is. Nai Sutinche in to Shiribi Gijun Shabat Papa Ino. What does the lady Berta?
So
Tanami Galung Domba, Domba Getaking Broken Moguyo.
Oh, Dralo.
What the Shiribi Gijun Shabat Papa is. Sanji Sumo.
So the Buddha stated that there are those who have fully ordained in monks and nuns who have disrobed. Chenrezig.
Shiribi Gijun Shabat Papa is. Nabi followed him all Bob broken man.
Yeah.
Shiribi Gijun Shabat Papa is. Nai Sutinchi Nitusana, Galuntan Gutsu broken to Sumarbe. Shiribi Gijun Shabat Papa Inos.
Oh, go to the outs. Those who have lost their vows go to the outsider's views. So it's been stated that those who have abandoned their vows of conduct go to the outsider's views, or are I'm not clear if it's are lower than the outsider's views or go to the outsider's views, and I apologize, but it's within that point.
Nabi Temple Hubatan. Narib Temple Hubat Chures. Shirib Temple Hugans Chuba Shiribal Chures.
It's stated that it is an outsider's dharma then.
Goma Druta Daju Tundan Temba Dayu Shinanis Shibi Druta Mawata Nabi Druta Mai Shabakaras. Tembi Gun Chabachi Jagaras. Tembi Gun Chabachi Jagaras. Dayu Gun Chabajagaras.
Dai?
Tawasan the Marva, Raja to be, Sheribi Trutamaina, Raja to be Zero Killing Chap. Taji Raji, Da Killing Chagres. Nabasaji Trutamaina, Taji Raji, Da Maruba Killing Chagres. Tayu Chane, Shanani, Tembi Chane, Sheribi Trutana, Nabi Trutama Chaba. Tembi Chane, Sheribi Trutama, Nabi Trutaka.
Okay, so then we find when we in other texts where we find the different in the tenet system teachings, where we find the differences between Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachings, and we find the difference in teacher, the difference in truth, and then the difference in the relationship with Atman or I. And so these are three distinctions that are made that show the Buddha is the teacher. And last 2 weeks, Rinpoche has made a quote in this class that I've forgotten. I haven't completed, incomplete, and I just want to quote it. The arguments contained within our treatises were not contrived through love of disputation. They set forth suchness only for the sake of freedom, They are not to be blamed if while expounding emptiness they show the falseness of discordant doctrines. That's from Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatara. I forgot 2 times, so it's my web redemption. Okay, so maybe some folks have some questions. Stasha, Ted's near Stasha, so then we'll go to John, and then Shibu.
Thank you. Well, I have a couple. One of them actually comes from something you were discussing last week.
Okay.
Right? So last week, in the explanation of the difference between the Svatantrika and Prasangika Madhyamika views,
Okay.
and the Prasangika being that phenomena exist merely designated upon the basis of designation,
Correct.
but not from their side in any way.
There's no intrinsic nature from either side. That's I looked up the word. The word intrinsic nature is the proper word. The autonomy asserts. So go ahead.
And so my question is, what is the basis of designation? Or if you could elaborate on understanding the basis of designation.
The ngama chiran the umaranju dawa dong tenjor dawa chabadets lasum. The chiran sumpure the ranj the ranjupa the dets the ranjin yure the dembama drupa kalen yine ranzing drupa yang nangla yure gangisena the
rang chenji to ranji to
yeah.
what do you say
Then umi tenjor the den garre the ming da the den garre.
that's what raju batan tanju ani chaba karasana raju badege ngao nya ngade lu yong ge jabares ngao nya lu yong ba jabares phobu ngan che to di war ni zu ni zu
Less so.
ni zu de raju da
Ranju dawa. Then the
tanju ge ngao ngao nya lu ta zang re ma tu phobu ngan zu yo mares
less so.
ta zang
Less so.
what the chaba de man
So the Minaway Autonomy School it asserts an intrinsic nature and connection between the consciousness that's apprehending the aggregates and the aggregates themselves that are apprehended, and them both having some intrinsic nature of thosenessness to come together and then create this this I. But there is some intrinsic nature within the conception as well as the basis that are necessary and codependent in a way, or codependent. Yeah. In the Madhyamika Prasangika view, this apprehension itself is not intrinsic. It is merely a name that is being placed on a basis of aggregates, a basis or a collection of things that then is named as this or that, but that has no intrinsic nature of what it is named. It is merely designated as such based on a collection coming together.
ngao nya be ngao nya lu ta zang de yures ta zang de yures
The existence that I designate that there is, when I designate that there is an I exists.
ta thaba drul nya be thaba drul ma de thaba drul nya be lu ta zang de yures ngade ngao nya be lu ta zang de yures chaba yures thaba drul nya be zang de yures
Okay, so when we establish that a rope is a snake, we are not validly naming or imputing upon that basis of designation. When we're naming the I on a basis of designation, then we're correctly imputing. Rinpoche went into this last week, and I'm still trying to find it, about the valid establishment of the name itself and how that is validly established, and we're working on that. But that's the Madhyamika view.
thaba drul nya be thaba drul ma de thaba drul nya be lu ta zang de men de ta nya be semen ne be
Okay, so the reason that we can't say that we can name the rope a snake is because it combats valid cognition. or it is at odds with correct, valid cognition, with truth, with valid cognition. Because there is a valid cognition that recognizes it as a rope. So once one recognizes that the rope is not a snake, the view that the rope is a snake is harmed at that moment. So since it's harmed, we can give that as a reason that it's not an existent. That name is that it's not an existent snake. So when we establish that there is an I here, nominally designated on this collection of aggregates and parts, there isn't a conflict with valid cognition that's taking place, because there is an I here that is suitable. It is terminologically suitable to be called I. So there's terminological suitability, it's called, and we'll get into that more because I'm at my level here of knowledge relative to the Pramanavartikakarika, and we're going to start working together on that. And you can find it in the section of the Hwatung section, of the special insight section of the LamRim Chenmo. Where we get when these it gets into those establishments. So if we can think along these lines, this is the best meditation one can do. Think about these points. This is real meditation. The word gom, which we translate as meditation, just means in Tibetan. We've used the word meditation, but it means to think again and again and again and again about something. We've lost time. It's okay. Thank you, Rinpoche. We will do the concluding prayers. LamRim Menda. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise the Mantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land, surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts, with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tu Chiji Rimche Gutsi Shapi Denrolang.